Possibly we can start with the JDBC now. Okay, then we'll be giving the introduction towards JDBC and moving on. I think you might be remembering like what other thing we kept into the discussion, right? We said like we are going to discuss the JDBC as part of this course. We'll be discussing the servlet, the JSP. Okay, optionally, as I said, like JSTL and EL. Okay, so these are five different technology we are putting into the perspective. Out of this, like JDBC is from your Java SE, and all the other things, okay, are from the Java EE platform. And from the Java EE platform, if you look into these technologies are basically web application technology, right? These are Java Enterprise Edition, okay, web application technologies, okay, web application technologies, okay. And JDBC is like it's not anything web application related. Okay. Anyway, now the question is like having this much technology. Like I was talking about yesterday, like the essence of these technology, how this technology help you, like moving towards the next technology, meaning the technology on which the real-time application development happen. Okay, such as the frameworks like Spring or Struts or hybrid kind of thing, right? So that we discussed. But like if you learn these things, it is not like it's just building a path towards the next level technology, but it is also giving you enough capability where you can develop some kind of web application, okay, some kind of web application which is communicating or interacting with the database, okay. So like that interaction part, you can, meaning interaction with the database from your web application, you can do using the JDBC kind of technology, okay. So meaning with this technology you can build some like web application, remember, okay. With this technology you can build some web application which is possibly doing some database interaction. But the only problem here, like it's all about very low level technology. All of them are very low level, okay. But the framework, they provide you a high end, like kind of thing, very high level standard, but here it is purely low level, okay. So you'll be feeling little bit boilerplate, redundant kind of stuff, but still that's the way to move, okay. Now first we have to start with the JDBC. Remember, for your JDBC actually we don't need a lot of prerequisite, as I said. Having some good knowledge on exception handling and a good knowledge on like interface, like implementation class, that kind of idea if you're having, you can easily follow along JDBC, okay. Meaning to the core Java, it is not having any direct dependency kind of thing, okay. So it itself is a self-contained API, okay. And here one more thing also you need to realize, first time possibly you are working with APIs. You have to understand that, because whenever you learn possibly like your core Java, you never learn anything called as API, okay. You only learn the language, right? What is there in the language, the features of the language, the basic construct of the language, those kind of thing you learn there, okay. But here it is a different kind of like it's a different area, different domain pretty much, okay. So from here onward, it is all about API, okay. You look into your JDBC, it is one API. Servlet is an API. JSP is a kind of API. You get into your EJB, you get into your JSF, wherever you go. Meaning, if you remember yesterday, I was showing you the J2EE technological stack, right? Whatever the thing you saw yesterday on that stack, that 40 different technology, whatever I was showing you, everything is a different, what you say, like an API. Everything is an API. And here with this API, there is a, like a small hassle here, you got to understand that this API, there is a concept of implementation. I'll come to that. But keep in mind, like, because it's a new world for you. I'm not talking in the perspective of advanced Java, I'm talking in the perspective of understanding the concept of API and implementation. Okay, so this JDBC, what we are entering into, remember it's a kind of API, JDBC API. Okay, and for this JDBC API, there will be a so-called implementation available. Okay, it's not just for JDBC, same for the servlet also. So this phenomenon, meaning this entire like paradigm you have to capture. Okay, so how some API is provided by Sun Microsystem or presently by Oracle Corporation, and for that particular API or for that particular specification, how implementations are provided by third-party vendor. Okay, you can think of like JDBC as a standard, JDBC as a specification or as an API. For this specification, this standard, this API, there will be varieties of implementations provided by many different third-party vendors. This lesson is important for you, understanding specification and implementation. So let me just give you a small idea, like what is the specification and implementation, such that I can get into the JDBC definition, because I need to define the JDBC. And surprisingly, I don't want to like get the new words. So yeah, look into this. I repeat again, this is the this is the concept entirely on your J2E platform. The entire J2E platform work on this model. Okay, what I'm discussing. Say like your JDBC, what we are discussing. Okay, the JDBC is basically a kind of specification. Okay, I don't think like I need to explain what is a specification, right? So JDBC is pretty much a kind of specification, and this specification is basically provided to you by either Sun or Oracle. Okay, presently Oracle. Okay, this is the specification being provided. Okay, and you know what is a specification. And for this specification, okay, under this specification, they said like what is JDBC, how function, the top level factors. Okay, and along with that, or you can just understand like this. You can understand JDBC specification, JDBC standard, or JDBC API. You can just refer in any way. Okay, so this is the thing what we are having. Okay. Now you're learning, like involved in this area. You will be learning this specification, the standard, the API of JDBC. But having this specification only never make much sense. Okay, it's just a top level document, right? Now having that specification never makes much sense. So what we really expecting is there should be some solid implementation of this specification. Are you getting my point? What we are expecting is there must be some kind of solid implementation of this specification. Okay, and these implementations, okay, this implementation is not something limited to Sun or Oracle. Okay, the implementation of this specification can be provided by any third-party vendor. Try to understand. Okay, the implementation of this particular specification can be provided by any third-party vendor. Any interested third party, okay, those who are interested about the JDBC standard, they can provide one implementation. Okay, so that means in the implementation side, you are having many parties. Okay, so there could be many different vendors. Okay, so this is one vendor. Okay, or let me just try it on this one. You can understand like imagine like JDBC implementation. Okay, the JDBC standard or JDBC specification being implemented, okay, by say like Oracle. This is assuming like, okay, so this is JDBC implementation by Oracle. It could be possible like I'll be talking about why Oracle or why certain vendors are interested. Okay, what is the reason behind that? But just understand this is open to others. JDBC implementation, say like by or from like Microsoft. Okay, Microsoft or JDBC implementation. Okay, JDBC implementation by like IBM or so on. There are varieties of people are implementing it. Okay, so here you can understand there are multiple parties. Okay, there are multiple parties on this side. This is the implementation side. Okay, and you're learning, try to understand here. Okay, the JDBC, which is a specification, always provided presently from the Oracle side, because Oracle is owning this entire technology. And in this technology, like as I said, everything comes in the form of a specification, right? Everything is a specification document, which is pretty much abstract. But for that specification, like there must be implementation. Until the implementation is not there, there is no meaning, right? And this implementation can be provided by any interested third party. Okay, any interested third party here. Okay, now why Oracle, why Microsoft, why IBM in this context? Every time possibly may not be these vendor. Okay, but for JDBC technology, these are the vendor. There are few other vendors also. Okay, but they provide implementation. Now we will never learn this implementation part, remember, because there are many implementation. How many implementation you will be learning? Are you getting my point? So we'll be never concentrating on the implementation side. Our interest will always be in the specification side. We'll be understanding the specification. If we understood the standard, picking up one implementation, working with as per our requirement is our interest, nothing more than that. Is it clear or not? Yes. So is it clear? Can you just explain me what I'm trying to say, Binay, Raksha?
Yeah, implementation is difference coming with specifications. Specifications and implementations are different. So we are not going to bother about implementation.
Implementation on others means different processors needs Oracle, Microsoft, IBM with JDBC.
Yeah. Yeah, see, why particular vendor like Oracle, Microsoft, IBM in this context, I'll be coming to that, like why they are interested. Okay, but if you are interested also, like you can implement. Okay, but keep in mind like this relationship, okay, how the specification and the implementation basically work. Okay, now your learning, this is important actually, your learning is never on the implementation side. We'll never learn. Why will not learn? Because there are many implementation. How many implementation you learn? Okay, now you can understand here like how these things work. This is where the model of your interface and the implementation class, that realization you can find here. Imagine like there is one interface available. Okay, this is where the polymorphic environment. This is where like the object-oriented polymorphism come in picture. There is one interface available. Imagine. For that interface, there could be multiple implementation classes. Meaning, like in JDBC, meaning in Java platform, whenever you're talking about API, I think API might not be new to you because you might have completed IO API, like input, output, stream API. You might have finished the collection API. If you look into those API, you'll be finding a lot of interfaces out there and implementation classes. The same realization here. Right, same realization goes where you will be finding some kind of like interfaces which is part of your JDBC API. Meaning in JDBC API, a lot of interfaces are there, and for those interfaces, the implementation classes are provided by this vendor. Meaning whenever I'm saying like JDBC implementation from Oracle side, actually it is not other than implementation classes for the interfaces available in JDBC API. Again, I'm giving you a brief idea before giving the like the definition of JDBC. Okay, so what I'm saying is your JDBC API. If you just look this particular site, if you look into this particular one, JDBC API. This is like a bunch of interface, right? Bunch of interface. Okay. So JDBC API, whenever you refer, it's a bunch of interfaces. Meaning, say like in JDBC API, you might be finding 50 to 60 interfaces. Okay, and those interface, meaning I'm talking about Java interfaces. In Java, how you are having the realization of an interface, that interface I'm not talking about the general interface store. Okay, so in Java, whatever the interface concept, okay, so in JDBC API, you will be having those interfaces on. And for those interfaces, these implementation parties, meaning these third parties like Oracle or Microsoft or IBM, what these guys are going to do is they are going to provide implementation classes. So whenever we say JDBC implementation by Oracle, that means these are the implementation classes. These are the implementation classes for the JDBC API interfaces. This meaning in the JDBC API, whatever the different interfaces available, for those interface, like the implementation classes are provided by whom? By these vendors. Meaning Oracle will provide its own implementation. Okay, and Oracle will provide its own implementation, and Microsoft will provide its own implementation, and similarly, like IBM will provide its own implementation. So whenever I'm saying own implementation, you need to understand that is specific to that vendor. Meaning Microsoft implemented on its own style, Oracle implemented in its own style, IBM implemented on its.
What type of driver is this?
No, this is not driver. This is not driver. We have not yet entered into that concept of JDBC driver. I'm just giving you the basic idea, specification and implementation, how this term is related. It's not driver.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the basic part. Okay. Now I think from this, you can simplify the whole stuff. That's the JDBC API. What I'm going to learn, possibly it is a bunch of interfaces. Okay. And those interfaces, because in core programming, interface, very good for programming, but it is really, meaningless without any implementation, right? So if you're having one interface, you can use it for programming. You can create one reference variable of that interface, but you cannot create one object for that interface, right? So in order to create one object for that interface, what you need? You need some kind of implementation class, right? So that relation you are realizing here, right? In JDBC API, the API or the specification or standard, they give you the interface. They say this is the interface. Always you are going to program to this interface only. But having this interface never make much sense until you are not having some, implementation classes. And who is going to provide these implementation classes? Vendors. Vendors implement it on their own convenience, on their own way. So, implementation part is nothing standardized. Oracle implements on its own way. Microsoft implements on its own way. IBM implements on its own way. So implementation side is never standardized. Hence, we never concentrate on the implementation side. We need one implementation, but we never concentrate on the implementation. Are you understand? Because this is a non-standard concept. Implementations from different vendor is provided in different way. But all of them, try to understand it as simple, like if I have one interface, okay, if I have one Java interface like this, just I'm giving it so that you can understand. So like I can say something like if I can just take some business term, I'll say employee service, just a simple one. Employee service. This is one interface I like. Okay, employee service I. Okay, and it is having one method called as public. Okay, and I'll be saying list of employee. Okay, don't worry, actually we're not getting it. Get employees. Okay, get employees. This is one method. Okay, I assume like this is one interface, Java interface, having one method called as get employees. But for this interface, say like you are implementing on your own way, the get employees logic, you are implementing on your own way, on your implementation class. I'm implementing the same get employees method, but in my way, meaning I might be having the class name different, I might be having internal logic different, but I might be achieving the same thing, but my internal implementations could be different and your internal implementation could be different. Ultimately, we are compliant to this interface, but our internal implementation goes different, right? Meaning if I'm writing two implementation class, okay, one implementation class having the logic in one way, other implementation class is having the logic in another way, but all of them are achieving the same thing, returning the list of employee. I'm talking about the get employees method. The same story here. Meaning in JDBC API, there's a bunch of interfaces available. Those interfaces are having some method, but those interfaces are implemented by these vendors. So when the vendors are implementing it, they implement on their own way. Okay, the way they feel convenient, they implement it. So this implementation part is pretty much, like non-standard. There is no standardized approach. No doubt All of them implement the JDBC API. That is perfect. But the implementation, internal logics and all these things are not standardized. Hence, like you are never going to work, or you are not going to program your application to this, because if you program to a particular implementation, what happen? Okay, you become tightly bounded to that vendor. Meaning, say like I'm directly programming to Oracle implementation. Then what happened? My program become Oracle specific. Okay, but tomorrow because of some reason I want to switch to Microsoft. Is the same program going to work? No, I again need to change my code, like relevant to Microsoft standard, right? So this is where the interface come into picture. You don't program directly to the implementation. Instead, you state, like program towards the API, that's the interface, change the implementation dynamically. Meaning if I program my application towards the interface and not programming towards an implementation directly, but bringing the implementation dynamically into my system at runtime, then today if I'm working with Oracle provided JDBC implementation, tomorrow because of any reason I want to move to Microsoft provided implementation, I can dynamically switch without making any changes in my code. Are you getting my point? What is the best benefit of having one standardized interfacing layer here?
In the implementation, we don't write any code, only vendors will be writing code. So we will be will be connecting to different database. It doesn't affect anything.
Yeah, you got that idea. But anyway, meaning, see, my intention is not to consider the database factor. My intention is much more to give you the comparative idea between interface and implementation. Okay, and so for that reason, I'm not talking about that database and all this thing. Meaning, in this JDBC context, you realize, okay, it is a database connection and all this thing. But first, try to realize the difference between interface and implementation, or specification and implementation. This is a key part actually. I mean, this is my realization, where I think like without having this understanding, if you get into anything, you get into Socket, you get into JSP, you get into EJB, you get into RMI, JNDA, anywhere you go, okay, you will be finding this realized always. Okay, so it is important. Okay. Anyway, now let me just get into JDBC. Okay, so here I'm defining.
Can you give overview once again, just like just an overview about that, what you explained?
Yeah, that is, see, first, are you understanding what I'm trying to explain? Am I talking about anything about JDBC? No. Actually, my interest is to explain you the difference between specification and implementation. Meaning, between these two, what is the comparative idea? Okay, so that is what we are trying to understand. But here we are taking JDBC specification as an example you think of. Okay, so don't think we are, meaning I'm particularly talking about JDBC here. My intention is to clarify the difference between specification and implementation. Okay. Now what I'm saying is, for an example, if you're talking about JDBC specification, okay, meaning JDBC, whatever we are going to learn, it is a specification, I'm saying, or I'm saying it is a standard, okay, or it's a kind of API. So you can like finalize with any notion, or you can say all of them: specification, standard, API. From this middle one, like from the standard, you can understand. Okay, I said this part is a standardized part, this part is non-standardized one, right? This non-standard meaning what? Meaning, say like there are multiple vendors, but they don't obey the same approach. Possibly the internal implementation part I'm talking about. Okay. Now what happened is, this particular JDBC specification or the JDBC API, whatever we are going to discuss, okay, as an API, if you look into, API is not other than a bunch of interface. Okay, meaning mostly I'm saying 90% or 95%, whenever anyone talks about API, they intended towards the interfaces. This is, okay, so this is a bunch of interface. I said JDBC API, you blindly believe that there is a set of interfaces available. Similarly, tomorrow I said servlet API. You can easily map, okay, so servlet API in the sense, there will be a bunch of interfaces. Okay, mostly, that's the reason I'm saying 95%. It doesn't mean like in the API classes should not be there. Classes can be there, but those are not the implementation class. So they're just support classes. So that's a different story. But maximum, whenever anyone refer API, the intention is about the interface side. So there are a bunch of interfaces, but don't conclude like API in the sense only interface. I never said that. I said bunch of interface, there could be some support classes. Okay. So whenever you look into JDBC API, there are a bunch of interfaces available. And whenever you use JDBC API, remember, whenever you use the JDBC API on your application, meaning whenever you are developing one application, you will be using JDBC API. Okay, you will be using the JDBC API. Now, JDBC API is not other than interface. That means you are going to use the interface. And using interface in your application is nothing new, because we know that. Okay, we call that one as programming to interface, right? So it is always a good one, or it is always an easy one to do some programming towards interface, right? So during your application development, you will be always using JDBC API. Okay, that means transitively it is ending up with programming to those interfaces. But having those interface, because in your core programming, you know that interface are just the abstract layer, right? They don't have any implementation, any real implementation. You can understand here, if I write one interface called as, like interface employee service I, that is indicating interface, like it is having one method signature called as get employees, but it is really not having any underpinning code about getting the employee. How we are really going to get the employee, that code is not here. It's just a signature, right? It says some notion called as get employees, right, for getting the employees, correct or not? So there is no implementation. But where the implementation are going to be there, the implementations are going to be as a part of that class which is implementing this interface. Meaning there could be some class like this, possibly there could be some class, I'm saying class, okay, employee service, like implementation, assume implements, what is that, employee service I, right? So you'll be writing something like this, and here, okay, you'll be writing something like public list of employees. Okay, we'll be saying get employees, and here goes the real code, right? This is here, like the real code goes here. This is right enough. So that means your interface is just for your programming purpose, but it really don't contain any code. The real code available where in the implementation classes. This comparison is clear?
Yes, sir, but how can we know that what is there inside this interface employee service? Can we know anything about what methods are present and what is the inside data which is present inside employee service I?
Meaning you take any interface, interfaces are public, right? So you can always see them, what is there, what the methods are available. Let me show you. So like in JDBC API, okay, in JDBC API, so like I'm showing you one interface. Okay, so, and like say like there is one interface called as connection interface. Okay, so this is from JDBC. Okay, so say like this interface, if you look into, you can easily understand. Say interface connection. Okay, and if you just, this is the way we need to follow the API. Okay, now if you just scroll down here, the method description, right? So this is one method, abort, clear warning, close, commit. All these are the methods. Are you understanding? So there is a way to follow these interface. You can follow that interface and you can check out what are the methods, right? But this is where that is the reason actually I realized that you might be having that gap in realizing, like the technical relation between the interface and implementation class. That is what I'm saying. So interface is a public one. Anyone writing an interface is not going to hide that, right? So interfaces are supposed to expose. So they will expose that. So you will be realizing, okay, in this interface, these are the methods available. Possibly you might not be knowing in a particular class what are the methods are available until you are not seeing them, right? But interface are publicly available. They are exposed to the outside world. So you will be always seeing like, okay, what are the methods available? Now I can see in my connection interface, these are the methods available. It's a lot of method available. Don't worry about them. Okay. But I can realize, okay, there is one method called as commit method. There is one method called as close method. There is one method called as create block. This is one method called as create club, right? So these are the different methods available, right? But these are the methods just signatured. These are the methods signature in the interface. Right now, these are just the method signature interface. But for this connection interface, there should be some implementation class available where the real logic for this commit method will be there, where the real logic for this close method will be there, where the real logic for this clear warning will be there. Are you understanding me or not?
Yes.
Meaning how in your employee service interface, there is one method available called as get employees. Okay, but it's just a signature, right? It's just a method signature. But for this signature, meaning for this particular method, the real logic is available on this implementation class, that is in the employee service implementation, right? The same relation is there, meaning with respect to what we are discussing here. Meaning if the JDBC API is a bunch of interface, one interface you saw now, that is the connection interface. Now the question is, for the connection interface, the real implementation will be available where? From the vendor provided implementation classes. Meaning for the interfaces available in JDBC API, there will be one implementation class, meaning there will be the implementation classes provided by the different vendor. Meaning, say like if Oracle is providing one implementation of JDBC API, then they will be providing one class which is implementing the connection interface. Similarly, Microsoft will be writing one class which is implementing connection interface. IBM will be writing one class which is implementing connection interface. Meaning connection is a single interface in JDBC API. But whenever you are getting the implementation for the JDBC API from different vendor, each vendor will write their own implementation class for the interfaces of the JDBC API.
We need to use interfaces for sure while we are coding. So
see, that is what I'm saying. Like in your core programming, you know, like during your interface learning, you might have got that idea. Like we are much more focused to do our programming to interface. We always do programming to the interface. Because in core Java, what happens is you never get much more time to realize that part. Because interface, as I said, it's a standard one. Now you think of like, so imagine we saw like there is in the JDBC API, there is one interface we saw. What is that? Connection, right? Connection is an interface. Right? Now this connection interface, for this connection interface, Oracle might have written one class, right? That class implementing connection interface. The name of the class is like this: Oracle connection. Oracle connection, implement connection interface, right? Microsoft is writing a class. Observe here what Microsoft is writing. It is writing Microsoft connection. Okay, this is the name of the class. Okay, assume like there is a class called as class Oracle connection implement connection interface. Class Microsoft connection implement connection interface. Similarly, class, what is that? IBM connection. Okay, imagine. So these are the different classes. Assume, meaning this is just an example. Okay, now Oracle provided one class named as Oracle connection, which is implementing the connection interface. Microsoft provided one class which is implementing the connection interface, but its name is something Microsoft connection. Now, are you going to directly program Oracle connection on your program? No. Why? If you program directly Oracle connection, then you are making your code, your program directly bounded to Oracle implementation. Now, what is the problem? If I directly program Oracle connection, what is the problem? The problem is tomorrow, if you don't want to use that Oracle provided JDBC implementation, instead you want to use Microsoft provided JDBC implementation, then you need to change on your code or not, changing that Oracle connection to Microsoft connection or not. So now what is the benefit? Meaning if you don't directly program to the vendor provided implementation class and you program to the connection interface directly, if you program to the connection interface, are you going to change whenever the implementation vendors are getting changed? No, because you are programming to a standardized API, right? So you are programming to the connection interface that is always there, right? Because don't you think, according to your core Java programming, if I write something like this, connection, okay, connection con equal to, can I say new Oracle connection? This is valid or not? If Oracle connection class implements the connection interface, I can write this line, right? Similarly, I can also write new Microsoft connection, right? I can also write like this, connection con equal to new Microsoft connection, or I can also write new IBM connection, right? That means this particular thing, shall I today, okay, imagine this is not there, okay, imagine this is not there. Now I'm working with a connection interface. If I directly program like this, then my program is tightly bounded, right? But if I don't directly program like this, okay, and if I find some way to dynamically bring Oracle connection or Microsoft connection into the picture, then I can make my code, you know, like independent of this vendor. And that is what you will be seeing as you're moving. But is it clear a little bit? So anyway, so this is what, you know, like the basic idea behind the specification and implementation factor. Okay, now the same thing you are going to realize here. Okay, so I'm just giving you the idea, like what is the JDBC. I'll be just defining it. Okay, don't worry about it, because as you're moving forward, you will be automatically realizing, okay, this is what, you know, like he was talking about or something. Okay, let me just give you one idea. What is exactly JDBC? I'll just define and we can stop it here today. Okay, now what is basically JDBC? Possibly like the JDBC, you know, like is acronym for Java database connectivity. Okay, so from there you can get a lot of idea, like this API or this specification is directed in which way, right? So meaning it's basically for some kind of database integration or things like that. Be looking into that. Now, if you define the JDBC, anyone is asking what exactly JDBC, how we'll be defining it as a definition. Okay, so that is what I'm mentioning here. JDBC is a standard abstraction, okay, or an API, standard abstraction or API. Now, what this API is for? Okay, this is used to access the databases. Okay, this JDBC API or this JDBC specification, the JDBC standard, okay, is used to access the databases. I think you might be having a little idea about the databases. Okay, so using this JDBC, you can access the databases in a database vendor independent way. Are you getting me or not? That means, say like you're developing one application. Think on this perspective always. You're developing one application. Your application is supposed to, you know, like work with some database. There are many databases. Oracle is having its own database, many product. IBM is having, Microsoft is having. There are many other vendors there, right? Now, if you are developing one application which is having, you know, like a requirement to communicate with one database. Okay. Now, so like today I'm developing my application. Today my application is developed in such a way that it is working with Oracle now. It is working with which database? Oracle database. Now it's fine. It is working perfect. But because of some reason, tomorrow, if I drop Oracle database, meaning my you know, like company took a decision that we are not going to work with Oracle, we have some issues with Oracle, something like that. So we are not going to use the Oracle database for the same application. Okay, the application in which earlier we used Oracle, now onward we are not going to use Oracle. That is our decision. Then what we are going to use? Now we are going to use Microsoft provided SQL Server. Microsoft is having one database called as SQL Server. Okay, and we are going to use that. Now the question here is, earlier your application was designed to work with Oracle. Now whenever you are dropping Oracle and bringing, you know, like Microsoft SQL Server there, do you think your application can directly work with the Microsoft SQL Server without any changes? Are you getting my point? That convenience is provided to you by JDBC. JDBC says, if you are programming your application, meaning if your application is a Java-based application, okay, if your application is a Java-based application, and it was earlier programmed when it was with Oracle, if it was programmed with JDBC, okay, using JDBC, if you programmed your application to communicate with Oracle, now if you drop Oracle and you are bringing Microsoft SQL Server, you don't need to make any changes on your program. and you can easily communicate to the Microsoft SQL Server. Okay, so that is what we are saying. Like JDBC is providing that standardization. Okay, meaning what standardization it is providing? It is providing a standardization where you can switch between the databases without making much changes on your code. Meaning you'll never make much changes. Meaning if you're a little intelligent, you don't need to make a single line of changes also. Without making a single line of changes, you can switch from one database vendor to another database vendor. That convenience is provided by the JDBC API. That is what I mentioned. It is a standardized API. It is standardization for what? It is standardization for accessing varieties of databases, like in a database independent way. You are never going to bound it to that particular database vendor. Okay, so vendor locking will not be there. If you bound to Oracle, that means you can never drop from Oracle. That kind of thing will not be there. Are you getting my point? So that kind of API it is. Are you understanding? Hello?
Yeah. Is there any other technology that is related to JDBC which works same as JDBC?
Meaning in which platform? In Java platform?
Is in Java platform.
Just Java platform, let me tell you, this is the lowest level technology for this purpose. Okay, this is the lowest level technology, but we have the concept of the framework. Okay, so like Hibernate and all these things, but they internally underneath they use the JDBC, right? So that's not a comparative factor here. So they provide you the framework style, but the only technology which is doing this kind of job is JDBC, particularly like providing you database vendor, like independency kind of factor. Okay, that's the only technology JDBC.
Whatever other platforms, is there any technology same?
Every platform the same story. You get into .NET platform, you'll be finding they have something called as edu.net. Okay, so depending on the platform they will be having, meaning particularly like if you look into the top giant technology, they have this kind of solution, because the point is very simple, visible point, right? I cannot make my application tightly bounded to a vendor. Imagine if that is the story. If I did that, then today Oracle will say, like the price is 10 rupees. Once the locking happen, agreement is done, Oracle will say, nah, the price is 100 rupees. I have to pay, right? So I cannot make my application vendor locking like that, right? So I should have that flexibility that I can switch, but that switching should not be the cost of a programming changes again, right? So what we are expecting is the switching should be in the cost of like very minimal configuration changes, okay, but not a giant or a huge programming changes. I don't need to sit again. So like today my application is running on Oracle and we took a decision to go to SQL Server. Then I cannot sit for 6 months because we are doing a database switch, right? Nowadays you check actually which application does on that way. Like, okay, so they are saying we are changing our database. It might be taking 6 months or 1 year actually for settling it down. So till that time, like the inconvenience is regretted. You are seeing anything like that? No, right? So what happened? They decided to change the database. It's a matter of a fraction. Just take the whole stuff down for a moment, like 1 minute or 2 minutes, put everything ready there, configuration changes, and make the things up in 2 minutes. That's it. You can just say like, okay, there is a technical issue, and the whole world convinced like, okay, there was a technical issue, right? So this is the way it happened now. You cannot expect like you are developing one application, nothing. I mean, that is what I'm saying. The understanding of interface and implementation is that way important. Okay, I mean, you can understand this model of interface and implementation, how it is beneficial. Okay, so interface, you will be always programming to interface. That's it. My application always programmed to interface. Implementation will be changed. That's it. Today I'm working with Oracle provided implementation. Tomorrow I'll throw Oracle implementation. I'll take the Microsoft implementation. That's it. That's that easy it is. Because for that I don't need to make any changes in my code. If I make the changes in my code, I have to sit and write it. Then I need to compile it. It's a lot of things, right? But like this small configurable changes is a matter of 1 minute or 2 minutes. That is the reason you would have seen like, a lot of different big applications. They go down, and sometimes you'll be finding the message. And what happened really, some kind of technical things happen like this behind this. Okay. Now, are you understanding this particular one? Meaning Both of you are clear?
Yeah, once you write your application and you can run in any, you can connect with any database, right? By using JDBC.
You can connect to any database by changing the implementation. You have to change the implementation. So like if you look into this diagram, now that is the reason I have taken the name like Oracle, Microsoft, IBM. So if you're working with, you're writing one application where the application is programmed using the JDBC API. But in order to communicate to Oracle database, you must take the JDBC implementation for Oracle. You have to have that. Okay. But tomorrow, whenever you're dropping Oracle database, you drop that implementation, meaning the JDBC implementation for Oracle. Now you decided to go for Microsoft SQL Server. Then you take one JDBC implementation for Microsoft SQL Server, meaning the implementation should be changed. When the database change, your implementation change. Your specification or API remains same there. And your application is programmed to that API only. API is not changed here. Are you getting my point? So that is what I think this definition is saying. If you look into, it says like it is a standard abstraction. I think the name standard, you know, like the Storm standard might be giving you a lot of idea what I'm really referring, right? So I'm saying it is a standardized concept. This API, okay, JDBC is a standard. Now it is used for accessing the databases in a database vendor independent way. That means we are not locking our application, you know, like while accessing the database. You know, we are using JDBC, we are free. You know, if you're not using JDBC, then 100% you are locking. How that locking and all these things happen, whenever I'm moving in an architectural manner, I'll show you possibly tomorrow onward. Now the JDBC is a standard abstraction, a unified abstraction, you can understand. So whenever we say standard or unified, you can understand, like you use the API once, but the implementation could be different. You don't bother about the implementation, don't change anywhere in your application, right? Now it is an meaning it's a standardized abstraction for Java application. That's the same definition to access the database in a database vendor independent way. So that is what exactly the JDBC is particularly. Okay, so it's just a standardized one, standard API. Any question you'd like to raise, so that we can stop here? I mean, I'll just give you some better idea, like how exactly these things happen, this notion, meaning starting from a low level factor, like how one application trying to communicate the database without having any notion of JDBC in our hand, okay? And we'll be reaching up to the JDBC, how JDBC provide the solution and what is the benefit. Okay, so we need around 2 sessions possibly for this realization, how the chronological development, the growth happen on this direction. And later we'll be bringing JDBC, then we're discussing JDBC driver. Okay, so it's a well organized journey, so I don't need to worry about it. Any question? See, let me clarify, you know, like I don't really, you know, like care a lot about, because I always want the interaction, because if you interact, then our understanding will be much better. Okay, so it's not like, okay, I'm coming and just saying something and you people are there, mute and all these things, and that's not a good idea. Okay, so just communicate and all these things such that we can have a better learning, you know, like experience. You can understand certain thing. Okay, instead of reading the document, because see, I have written this document and I've already read it, so there's nothing to read. So my job is, because once I hand over this particular document, never feel like it's just a, you know, like the process of reading. Okay, so don't think on that way. My job is to explain you. Okay, so whenever I'm explaining, possibly I will be using this model, like in this particular tool, I'll be just explaining the thing. Once my explanation is done here, I'll be possibly giving a mapping here in the document, like, okay, which part I'm referring. And once that is done, then programming will be writing the live coding and all these things. Okay. No questions so far?